Let's go a little bit more into some detail about some vocabulary. Just remember that we got lots of different ways of describing things, um, and they sound similar, but they aren't the same. Population distribution. There is only one population distribution. The population has a distribution, and that's it. There's one single thing, and that's it. Now, from population distribution, like this one, 50-50 red and blue, you may pull different samples. These are called distributions of sample data. This one had 40% red. This one had 55% red. This one had 65% red. Each of them are a sample, and it's a distribution of the sample data. Now, from each of these p-hats can then form their way. Here's 40, I'm sorry, here's the 40% one, maybe here's the 55% one, here's the 65% one. Each of these samples led to a statistic, and those statistics find their way into the sampling distribution. Again, a distribution of all the different values that a statistic takes on from all possible samples. Take a look at another example. Um, Mars Incorporated said the mix of M&M milk chocolates is 24% blue, 12% orange, 16% green, 14% yellow, and 13% brown. Assume that the company's claim is true. We want to examine the proportion of orange M&Ms in repeated samples of 50 candies. Which of the graphics could be the approximate sampling distribution of the statistic? Um, so first of all, um, 24% blue, but that's not 24%. This must be a sample distribution, meaning that we've gotten one sample, and this is the distribution of colors from that one sample. Now, between these two, both of them are talking about p-hat, so they're both summarizing something about a statistic. The orange candies are about 20%. We probably would expect the sampling distribution of orange candies to be centered around 20. So this is probably the sampling distribution of p hat, where p hat is sample proportion that is orange. This one's centered like around 40. And I don't see any of the candies centered around 40. So I don't know what kind of sampling distribution it is. So this looks to be a sampling distribution, or at least an estimate of a sampling distribution, um, but not of orange candies. I don't know what it is, but it's not of orange. All right. So describing sampling distributions. Um, One of the things that, again, we're building towards is this idea is that we can't do population data collection, but we can do it for samples. But and we'd really like to say that our sample statistic is a good indicator of what's going on at the population level. We can only say that if we think that um, sample the sample statistic is unbiased. And what do we mean by unbiased? Well, our definition is that an unbiased estimator means that the mean or the average of the sampling distribution is same as the true value that the parameter being estimated. So when we, let's say, do the red chip thing and we get all of these p-hats and we look at the sampling distribution of p-hats, that the center there is the same, sorry, the mean there is the same as that thing that we would try to estimate if we simply put our hand in, got one handful of chips, and then said, well, based on this, I think there's 45% red. Well, we can't always get the right answer, but over repeated trials, the statistic should have an average that's the same as the thing that we're trying to estimate. Okay, so that's one idea. We want unbiased estimators. The second thing that we want out of our estimates is that we want it to be reasonably close to the real answer. Now, we describe how close something is to the real answer by talking about its variability. Here's an example. It says television executives and companies who advertise on TV are interested in how many viewers watch particular shows. According to the Nielsen ratings, Survivor was one of the most watched TV shows in the United States every week that it aired. Suppose that the true proportion of U.S. adults who have watched Survivor is 37%. Now, this 37%, we made that number up. Okay, but let's just say, let's run with that and just and see where this ends up. Can you imagine interviewing 100 adults from a population where the population proportion is 37%, right? And you get a p-hat. And then you do another simple random sample of 100, you get another p-hat. And you do that repeatedly until you get a distribution of p-hats. Oh, yes, centered around 37%. Hey, but sometimes we get as high as 52%. Sometimes we get as low as 22% out of this out of this sample. All of them are valid numbers and all of them are estimates to the true proportion, the population proportion. Now, imagine doing the same thing, but with a sample size of 1,000. We do those simulations, and this is the sampling distribution that we get. Wow, maybe it goes up to 43%, as low as 31%, but it's all very much more compacted, meaning with larger sample sizes, there's less variability in the distribution of p-hats. That means our guesses are more likely to be around the right answer. So larger samples can have a clear advantage over lower samples. They're much more likely to produce an estimate close to the true value of the parameter. Big idea and a little bit of none of ideas that need you have to struggle with. It says the variability statistics describe the spread of the sampling distribution. This is primarily based on the size of the random sample. Larger samples give smaller spread and better estimates, therefore. It does not depend on the size of the population, which is the thing that a lot of students have a hard time with. But truly, it only has to do with the sample size, not the population size. As long as we meet that independent condition, that the population is at least 10 times larger than the sample. All right. Here is um, here is two histograms, right? Um, and we're going to go through these big ideas, bias and variability. This is the population distribution. This is the distribution of all 222 recorded eruptions for a month and the interval between the eruptions. Um, the median of this distribution is 75 minutes. Now, imagine that we did 500 simple random samples of size 10 from this population. So we get 10 of these intervals, and we then find the median of that those 10 intervals, and we plot it. And then we get another simple random sample, get a median, we plot it. And this is the estimated sampling distribution of those medians. Okay, big question. Is this unbiased? Well, I don't know. The only way we can tell whether a statistic is unbiased is that the population, the population parameter needs to be the same as the mean of the sampling distribution for that statistic? Well, the population parameter was said to be 75 minutes, right? Is that the same as the mean of this distribution of medians? Well, it says here that it's 73.5 minutes, to which I say these are not the same. Therefore, we say median is not an unbiased estimator, or I should say, sample median is not an unbiased estimator of population median. Now, many statistics aren't unbiased estimators. Min, max, median, Q1, Q3, none of them end up being unbiased estimators of the population versions of the same. Um, Second big idea. Suppose we've taken sample size of 20 instead of 10. Would the spread of the distribution be larger, smaller, or about the same? And the answer is we expect the sampling distribution of need to all the words, sampling distribution of medians to have smaller spread, smaller spread, or less variability because the sample size is larger. Okay, now last one. Describe the shape of the sampling distribution. Well, the shape of the sampling distribution of median, in this case, is skew. Now we have to give a direction. Be skew left. Because it's skew left, that means the mean is below our typical values. Okay, which is the reason why, again, our mean was lower than 75. Okay, what does this mean for underestimating or overestimating the population median? Well, it means that there's a lot more outcomes on that above the mean. Okay, means that we typically overestimate the median using sampling, at least in this case. All right. Let's talk about what we want. We talked about these two really big things, bias and variability. What do we want? Well, if we think of bias as consistently um, missing the mark, like in this group, then these are centered away from the real target. So we say that has high bias. Well, this group also, the center of these things also are missing the mark. That has high bias. We want low bias. We want, regardless of the amount of variability, we want the center of those marks to be around our target, the real answer. This is the idealized. We want low bias and we want them tightly packed together, that we want to know, even though we're not exactly in the very middle of the bullseye every time, that we are around the bullseye and we're close to the real answer and we're clustered around the real answer. So that's what we want. We are always desirous of low bias, low variability. All right. Let's talk about a very famous problem called the German tank problem. Here's the general idea. Um, uh, during World War II, the Allies were capturing German tanks, which were given serial numbers that were sequential. And by looking at the serial numbers, we were trying to figure out how many tanks did the Germans actually have. Um, So now you've got a sampling problem. You can't look at all the German tanks because they're behind enemy lines. The ones that you have, let's say, represent a random sample. How good is your estimate? Now, to simulate this, imagine someone has 342 slips of paper that are marked from 1 to 342, representing one random tank, or each of them representing a tank. And you pull four slips of paper. And so now you have your sample of four tanks. And then you say, well, how could I estimate the total number of tanks at 342? Well, there's a bunch of different ways that you might do. You might add the lowest number and the highest number from those slips of paper and get an estimate. You may take the average of the four slips of paper and then add two standard deviations based on those four slips of paper. You may just double the mean or double the median. Each of these four were student proposed ways of solving the German tank problem. Which one is best? Well, we want low bias and we want low variability. So of the choices that the students made, let's just say this one, the mean plus two standard deviation, this one looks biased. And if it's biased, this is going to give us wrong information. We don't care how accurate it is. It's wrong information. So we can eliminate the mean plus two standard deviations. Now, of the remaining three, the remaining three are all unbiased. Now we go to the second thing. Which one gives us the lowest variability? Well, certainly not two median. This is the highest variability of these four student chosen ones. I would say that max min has the lowest variability of the four on top. Okay? Lowest variability because its spread is smallest and it's unbiased. So we get unbiased and the lowest variability of these four, max min would be our choice. But it so happens that the government ended up using the partition method, this fourth method, which wasn't produced by one of the students, right? And why would they choose this method? Well, first of all, although you can't really tell, this is unbiased as well. So it meets our first criteria. But secondly, among all of these methods, it has low variability. Okay? The last thing is, like we saw in the previous one, this particular method tends to overestimate. And if you're going to try to make your war plans, you probably overestimate the number of German tanks as compared to underestimate. So the reason why the partition method was chosen in World War II is because of those factors. And that concludes our 7-1 lecture.